Now that we have our feet wet, we really want to expand the idea of breaking down a feature and then eventually making a game. What does that actually mean? Well, that means we're going to make a game. Hey everybody, my name is Jason Boza and welcome to Make and Break Games. So it's always going to come down to this, and now we need to figure out what type of game we want to make. The first thing we're going to need is something called a game design doc, or GDD for short. You can think of it as a blueprint, and it should have every detail that we need in order to make our game. And when I say every detail, it needs to have every detail. Basically, you should be able to visualize and feel how the game should play just based on the game design. For example, we could say something like, I want to move my character left and right, or to be more specific, I would say I want to move left or right on the x-axis in about 200 pixels per second, and also the character's orientation should swap depending on the direction I'm going. See how in the second version it's much more detailed and actually able to be built. As in the first one, it's very vague, and left and right can basically mean whatever, without any parameters to go by, such as speed, or any conditions such as orientation. You are basically just making a character move left and right arbitrarily. Now that doesn't mean that the GDD is going to be 100% correct and accurate right off the bat. In fact, it's going to go through a ton of iterations. For now, we need a base to work off of, and for those interested, this is kind of what we have so far. The first thing we wanted to establish is the genre and the setting of the game. To start off, this is going to be a 2D platforming Metroidvania. For those of you that don't know what a Metroidvania is, the easiest explanation is that it's a game like Metroid or Castlevania. But to get into more detail, I had to do some research on what a Metroidvania was, and the best definition that best suits our game goes a little something like this. A subgenre of platforming games that focuses on guided nonlinear progression and utility-gated exploration. The phrase guided nonlinear exploration basically means having many ways to proceed through the game, but the game then kind of pushes you towards a certain path. This is where the utility-gated exploration comes into play. A common scenario that can be seen throughout Metroidvanias is that there's going to be a certain obstacle that you can't pass unless you get that special something from somewhere else. A very common one would be a ledge with an open path that you just can't reach, and then you go to a different path, find out that you can get double jump, and now that path is easy to obtain. And that feeling of finally exploring that area that you didn't have access to before, it's one of the highlights that make Metroidvania so appealing. Now the setting of the game isn't set in stone because it can change as we develop the game. The genre is what we're building towards, but the setting is something that kind of gets built around it. Now I know this is kind of a strange move, but the setting doesn't affect games like it does other forms of media. For instance, if we're talking about a book, the author has to build that picture in your mind. And with that in mind, the setting becomes much more important. When we're talking about a video game, the most important thing is how it feels. Depending on how the game feels, the setting can be adapted in order to reinforce the overall experience. As a starting point, the setting is going to take place in a Renaissance-inspired fantasy world, where a lot of the action will take place on a massive campus. This way we'll have a lot of liberty to really diversify our levels, while kind of keeping a similar theme overall. Now there might be a little bit of a cliche here, but there's a scientist somewhere that found something that they weren't supposed to find, brought it to a spot that they weren't supposed to bring it to, and all hell breaks loose, and that's where we have our little bit of a story. We'll talk about later on as we have that more fleshed out. The next thing we have to think about is what influences our game. Of course, there's a ton of Metroidvanias already out there, and even more 2D platformers in general. For general gameplay and field control, we're definitely looking into Hollow Knight. For those of you who haven't heard of Hollow Knight, I'd highly recommend you check it out. Hollow Knight is a more modern Metroidvania with exceedingly high reviews. But when I played Hollow Knight, the first thing that caught my attention was how intuitive and easy the controls were. The control I felt I had on the character was super solid. I never felt like it was slow and clunky, but I also didn't feel like it was too fast to keep up. Another game we're going to draw influence from is one of my personal favorites called Darkest Dungeon. Now Darkest Dungeon isn't a 2D platformer like we're going for, but it's instead a 2D turn-based RPG. The component we want to adapt from this game is more its art style and ambience. One of the things that really attracted me to this game is how tense the game was. Everything from the background to the foreground and the transitions in between were very well made. Every time you take an action, you feel the weight of that action, and every time you get hit, damn, does it hurt. This had a lot to do with the art style that I went with and the sound that came along with it too. That's a little insight on the GDD that I'm currently writing, and as it becomes more solid and fleshed out, we'll talk about it more. I'm currently working on the core gameplay mechanics and the in-depth descriptions of them. In the next video, we're going to go over some of those details and you can get an idea of how we're going to tackle making a game design doc. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that some of you guys are starting to think about what you guys want to make. Right now we're laying down our foundation. We need a strong foundation in order to make this great project happen. In either case, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.